Hey guys, I just wanted to pop in and give you guys some tidbits on this cycle. So
Many things.
many things, yeah. First and foremost, so this new cycle, we're focusing on bent press, one arm deadlift. We're developing mobility, and then we're also doing like ring dips and pull ups. We kind of always do pull ups. We do vary the pushing. This time it's ring dips. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things about the program. So, one, we do cycle. Somebody had asked me that. And I think it's maybe hard to recognize our cycles sometimes because we don't do the typical waving thing.
We're not peaking, basically.
We don't start low volume, build high intensity. The theory with internal strength model is that's a lot of wasted volume, essentially, that really all you need to signal improve is the right amount of intensity, which is typically high, which are those 1 sets to failure. That being said, we have now this kind of 2 to 3 set thing in there often because 1 set to failure is
super demanding. And it takes time to figure that out to really make it work the best. So we just want to have flexibility in there because it's a generalized program. So we have a wide range of people who are doing it, which is, there'll be more on that later.
But. And there will be days where you just show up and you just don't fucking feel like doing 1 set to failure. I mean, it's a pain in the butt. So, the research shows that like the efficacy really falls off after that third set. Like first set, great. Second, third, fourth and fifth are a waste of time.
Right.
So that's why that's in there. We repeat certain exercises, like I said. The rest of them are really changing because, for example, if we want to target biceps, it's like there's all kinds of ways and angles to target the biceps, and you don't want to do the same exact bicep exercise because you just build this really strong string, basically, that moves this one way, but there's so much range that you're missing. So we're just trying to constantly address all of the bicep.
Right. Well, in addition to that, I mean, outside like themes you'll always see is that we're always going to train rotation of the rotating joints and try to expose as much range of motion as possible to train all of that tissue because every angle that you change biases different fibers of tissue. The other aspect of changing things up, though, is that the more you do the same thing, the more efficient your body's getting at doing it, which creates less of a training effect. So there's a lot of changes there, and that's simply because we want a novel response, just meaning that it's harder for your body to do it because that creates a better training response. So we do change things up quite a bit because we found that staves off that accommodation of efficiency.
Totally. And so it's kind of a both camps are right in a way, but like if you do, like there are some really high level coaches that are saying, good job for creating a boring program that never changes. And it's like, no, not really, because you do need to change it up. Like if you just do the same old back squat, hinge, hip thrust, like the same old all the time, your body will eventually not adapt to those that well. And you will start to adapt better if you challenge those muscles in different ways. Like you don't have to stop doing the hip thrust, just add other stuff that's new.
Right. That changing exercises up initially was created to prevent that from happening, that over efficiency of specific tissue. The way that we deal with that outside of changing exercises, though, is that we're constantly training the capsule of the joint to improve its capacity overall. And that very much has the same effect as changing your exercises because it's like you're bringing a different joint to the same exercise, even if you're changing it up less. But we basically take it from both ends. But
sounds geeky.
It does. Yeah. Unintentional.
So the other thing about the program is that I really want you guys to understand that it's like a restaurant menu, basically, of stuff that you can do. Like it's a thick, deep program. You don't need to do every single workout that's in that program. We like to do morning cardio. We like to do a lot of zone 2 because it just makes things recover better, but it's not really adding much of a stress. We like to do it separate from when we do our strength training. Ideally, I'm not going to ride a bike the same day I'm going to train my legs, kind of a thing. And then depending on how much stuff you have going on in your life, you may very well get by easily on just 2 days of that internal strength model with the rest of it being some of that low intensity steady state, and then a couple of the kin stretch classes that you may or may not need. And the way that you can combine those days is you can kind of look and see like which one of these days aligns a little bit more with what I need to do for my upper body, like, and then pick one or two of the exercises that aren't being done and maybe switch out or whatever.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, I think a good way to sort of organize it overall in your head is we want everyone in the program to get a good amount of the joint and tissue specific training. That's kind of the overall foundation. Get some low intensity cardio in there. And then based on your goals, your ability to handle stress, your age, your training age, all those things is where you start to put on more intensity. Like for both of us now, I mean, we're both in our 40s. We've both had a lot of years of hard, intense training. We don't need that much intensity now. Like I do 3 days a week of strength training and doing 3 days a week of jiu-jitsu. That's all the intensity I need. I couldn't do all of the stuff that's in that program because it would make me feel like shit. If I were in my 20s, like back in my CrossFit days, I could handle all of the stuff in that program and I would do well with that.
No kids, no wifey.
Yeah, no kids, no wifey, right, the single days. Again, our hope is that you're learning about your body and finding the right dose of stress. So when you're coming back on these days, however many days you're doing, you should feel pretty damn good when you get back to that same day that you did last week. And
ready to go.
Ready to go. And the way that you feel after those training days, you shouldn't be crushed. The actual training session itself can be really intense and it can feel very crushing during it, but the after effect should be a lot different than what you normally have experienced as far as like soreness. If you got to fall down on the toilet when you sit down, you may not need that much intensity.
I feel like it's like sore, like worked all over, fatigued, like whew.
Not crushed.
But not like crying the next day because you maybe got rhabdo kind of a thing. Or like, if you come back the next week and you go to hit squats, you should be recovered to the point that you're improving a little bit, like something positive is happening. And if nothing positive is happening, then maybe too many things have gone on. And so what we also tried to do because of that is alternate. So 1 week we have the high intensity, the next week we have the dynamic effort or some such type of a thing. The pistols, maybe a little bit different because we don't always have the intensity or volume on a pistol. There's a lot of struggle with mobility anyways, but essentially it pops around like that so that we're trying to mitigate the intensity so that it's not too much intensity for you.
Hence the lower volume stuff. So if you're somebody who's traditionally done a lot of volume, it can be hard to take some of that away. But if you're doing 1 or 2 hard sets, that shouldn't be enough to derail your progress. But a good way to measure this coming in week to week, or if it's like if you have a strength week and then you do some dynamic stuff, the next week when you get back to that, you've now had 2 weeks. You should be at least able to get through the same weight for the same amount of time, if not a little bit more weight or time on that. That's a really good way to measure that. If you find, and it typically isn't every 2 weeks, but over a period of weeks that it's trending backwards, then we know that there's too much intensity happening somewhere and we may need to back off a little bit.
Or too much volume. Yeah, too much stuff. Also, one thing to keep in mind, a lot of folks might freak out about, like, I'm not doing as much volume as I used to do.
That's good.
It is good. Like, you just don't need it. Like, if you're seeing progress week after week, I don't know. I mean, you could really compare end of cycle to end of cycle, and you go through this beat down in a regular training cycle where everything just feels horrible. You're almost getting sick and not sleeping. It's really intense. You're making up words. You don't like anybody anymore. And we've done that. We've done those cycles. And
more than I'd like to admit.
You get a 5-pound PR, it's like, whoa, and that's amazing, if you've been lifting for a long time. But the first time we switched to the internal strength model, I dropped out all that volume and got a 5-pound PR in 1 week. And I was like, it was impressive. But also to keep in mind that all of the other exercises that we are doing are training. You're using all of the tissues to do that stuff too. So even though it doesn't seem like it's a specific target for the hip or the quad or the hamstring or the glute, it's getting used in other things. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was how to do the capsule thing. So capsule/mobility. That's intended to be like not like a break, but like a transition. Like if you just constantly focus on the superficial musculature, the main program kind of does mostly focus the intensity of strength and hypertrophy on those tissues. The rest of the stuff is kind of a prep to go up to that. you should make progress on the capsule and the rotation, but the main focus is really that linear stuff that everybody wants to get better at. The capsule work is when you really need more space, desperately need more space or range of motion.
Or if you've never ever trained that stuff before
Right.
and you've only done traditional training, you have a lot of tissue in the deeper parts of the joints that just hasn't had training. And so backing off the intensity on the other stuff and really focusing on the capsule only will help you make progress, because those are almost always the limitations on making progress on that linear stuff, on the classic exercises that you're familiar with.
Yeah, and we put enough of those things in the capsule so that if you do that for 2 months, you're not going to lose strength and muscle mass. Like it really feels like you're going to, and it's like, oh my God, but you won't lose.
I've said this before, and I will always say this. I took a whole year off from doing any heavy strength work at all, and I only did capsule work, and I came back in a year very slightly weaker than I was, but in 6 weeks, I basically PR'd every single lift at my best ever. So capsule work, it will absolutely make progress. It just feels completely different than what you're familiar with doing. So just embrace that shit.
Yeah. But even if you take a month to do that, like it's better than nothing. You can also alternate, like if you want to do capsule lower body and stick with the other upper body for a couple months and then flip the next 2 months, you can also totally do that. That could be fun, you know. And the whole goal with this program is that there are just the options. Again, it's like going to a restaurant. You don't necessarily need to eat everything on the menu, but you could.
Yeah, and really, I mean, our goal, like we said, is to help you learn about what your body needs and what it responds to. So you do have a lot of flexibility as far as how you play this out. Like it is a choose your own adventure kind of thing. But if you need help and you're just confused or lost, we're always available to help guide you and help you make these decisions about what works best. So
we do really want you to reach out to us.
Yeah,
like,
we love talking to you
actually
because
text.
we don't see people in person anymore, rarely. And so there's a whole bunch of you out there that we see you out there typing your stuff in, and we love it, but we would love to talk to you too. So just hit us up.
Yeah. The last thing was just I wanted to Grayson to do some tips on the bent press.
Give me
that's
that
his
mic.
wheelhouse.
Yeah. Okay. So the bent press, it can be overwhelming to progress because it's really challenging. Like there's very few lifts that will expose so many areas of maybe limited mobility and
Which we did work on for 2 months leading up to this, though. So.
Totally, we've been working on it a lot. However, 2 months, if you've never bent pressed before, I mean that's a good baseline. But I've been bent pressing for years now, and I still have stuff that I'm working on, and I'm constantly working on all of the mobility there. So it's a very long-term progression because it is a really advanced, demanding lift. So as far as progressing it goes, I would encourage you to be less concerned about the overall weight that you're using on it and paying a lot more attention to how the lift is feeling, even if you use the same weight for a really long time, because it puts so much demand on your shoulders, your hips, and your spine all together. There's just a lot of stuff to coordinate there. And you may not even be doing a full bent press. You might be doing a modified version where you have weight loaded just on the shoulder, or maybe you're not even doing the press part, you're just doing a windmill. All of those options can be progressed the same way. I'm just going to use the bent press generally because it's not easier to explain, but that's what we're doing is bent pressing. So whether you're using a variation of the bent press or not, all of these would apply. Since you have just a few minutes in the program to play around with it, it's sort of like work up to something that feels heavy. That could be multiple reps. That could be just one heavy one. I find the progression on adding weight to the bent press is slower than on other lifts because you have so many more variables that you're dealing with. So even if you stuck with the same weight for weeks and weeks and weeks, what you should be at least feeling is that you have a lot more comfort getting into that position. You may be able to get deeper down. You may find that you're able to, if you're doing the full bent press, you're pressing yourself away from the weight more effectively without just pressing the weight up. All of those things are equally as important, and all of those ingredients are what are going to make a very heavy bent press if that's your goal. But a lot of the bent press, when I coach people in person doing this, is we want to get really comfortable with it and feel like it's a nice position to be in. So that's really what we're working towards. That's way more important than worrying about adding weight. Now, if you're somebody who already has a lot of the mobility, maybe you have a little more familiarity with the bent press, it's absolutely fine to progress this the old school way where we're just trying to add a little bit of weight to that. I still wouldn't want you to think about the same way that you could add weight to a squat, though. It's not quite the same as that, so that progression should be a little bit slower, even if you're at the point where you can add weight week to week to week. But yeah, again, it's sort of it's one of those things that just is, to me, out of all of the lifts that exist out there, it's very much at the top of the list as far as putting demands on every aspect of your coordination, your mobility, your strength, and all
What
of that.
kettlebell did you start with? I remember there's some old video of you with like the little tiny kettlebell.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started the bent press, like, the 24 kilos, 53 pounds, I mean, it felt sketchy and uncomfortable, and like I needed a bunch of warm up to do it. Granted, we were bent pressing before we did the internal strength model stuff, but I remember initially my goal was to do it with a 48 kilo kettlebell, 106 pounds. I was like, that thing, because I would put it up on my shoulder and just think about trying to do the movement and being like, this is so far away. It's ridiculous. And when I finally got to it, I mean, it just felt like such a huge milestone. And it probably took me a little over a year of pretty dedicated practicing to be able to get that 48 kilo kettlebell up in like a very sketchy, uncomfortable kind of way. So, and that was like 2018. So six more years.
185 kettlebell.
80 kilos is my best with the kettlebell. So
what was that? What did that guy do? This giant stone thing that you showed me that video. It was like
the Indian dude, 286. Yeah, 286 bent press with a big round concrete ring with a bar in the middle.
And then a
Amazing.
windmill.
Yeah, my daughter's going, he doesn't even look that strong. It's because he's got all of the other components. Anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
But again, if you're having issues with the bent press too, if you find that there's just a specific part of it where you get stuck, because that does happen. Like if you have limited hip rotation, it's going to really affect how much you can get your hip back. It's going to put more demands on the spine. So you might feel like you run out of hip and you're like, I can't twist my spine enough. I can't get my shoulder back enough in external rotation. There can be some big things that can really make you feel stuck. And I think just not trying to push through those is the best option. So you just are better off finding more limited range of motion, working on the joint specific stuff. But if you're really stuck and you're having trouble with it, let us know, because it's a wonderful lift to get good at. It's going to help.
Send us videos. Text them to that 303 number. Text a form video over and we'll look at it.
Yep.
He'll look at it.
Yeah, I got you.
He's the bent presser.
Outside of that, that's pretty much it. We've probably been rambling for too long now, so let's.
Yeah, so I hope you guys like this cycle. Communicate with us. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Yeah, hope
Talk
that
to you soon.
cleared up
I
some
hope.
stuff.
All right.